Hey Void, how you doing? So, I'm continuing to really jump around here in terms of films. I'm either watching a lot of really new or a lot of really old ones, and jump back to 1932, continuing to refill movies I really should have seen a long time ago. And I remember this is one I actually did try looking into when I was much younger, but I guess essentially I tried recording it off TV when I was but a wee lad. But I think for some reason it didn't record properly, so I only saw just the very beginning. So I never really got a decent opportunity to see The Mummy, the original 1930s Mummy. I've already talked about the Brendan Fraser one and how it is a delight. This movie is an entirely different animal. Now, while that one is kind of listed as a remake, the fact that they use only some broad strokes of the story and Imhotep and Anok-Sunamun are the only characters that actually appear. If anything, the Mummy seems to take more inspiration from Dracula than anything else. This is one of the first Universal ones to not be based directly on a literary work, but was mostly based around the rumors at the time of the curse of King Tutankhamun. So they decided to make it based on that, but they pulled a lot of elements from Dracula since they had just filmed Dracula, I believe, 1 or 2 years before. And, well, that really worked, so they kind of pulled some broad strokes there. You can see a lot of characters that kind of parallel, and like the romance angle between Imhotep and his reincarnated bride is definitely there. Now, other than the fact of them having kind of a parallel there, it's definitely very different from the 90s one. And this movie has a lot of mood going for it and definitely atmosphere, and it's working pretty well actually. It still holds up very well. Boris Karloff as Imhotep is definitely doing very well. Though I will say having him go by the name of Ardith Bay threw me off a little bit also, since that was a character from the 90s one also. But apparently it was a jumble up of the term death by Ra, so that became his name for when he was reincarnated. I was kind of surprised at how some of this started off. Like, I'm going to make a lot of comparisons to the 90s mummy because that was what I was more familiar with. So, this one starts with the mummy already being found and cataloged. So, and he's up and walking within the first 10 minutes of the movie. So, I was surprised there. But it isn't really focused on at the moment for that, as it does like him doing a big vengeance thing isn't really the focus. He's mostly just trying to track down his bride. So it does like a 10-year jump. And then he helps point some researchers towards the tomb of Anok-Sunamun. And, but his rituals to resurrect her are still failing because her soul seems to be elsewhere, as she was essentially reincarnated repeatedly through the ages. And is now in, Helen, a person who's just visiting the area, I believe, with her doctor. Helen's half Egyptian and apparently definitely feels an immediate connection to Imhotep as soon as she sees him. But she's also having a bit of a thing with one of the archaeologists, so a little bit of a love triangle there, and it's interesting to see her pretty much trying to resist essentially the call of the mummy. And the mummy's doing all he can to, well, remove all the obstacles in his way. Boris Karloff is a very commanding presence in this movie, and he's doing very well. And though they definitely try to over-explain some of the Egyptian isms for it, like when you're talking about it, then when he's leading Anok-Sunamun to then for a ritual for Anubis, he specifies Anubis, the guide to the dead, to another ancient Egyptian who would already know this. It's clear that they're definitely telegraphing a lot more to the audience, since I guess a lot of this would have been fairly less commonly known to the American audiences, particularly since a lot of this was just brand new in terms of like the discovery of King Tutankhamun. The makeup effects are very good in this, but there isn't too much in terms of other special effects to really speak of. It's definitely more of a slow burn intensity rather than an outright horror. This one feels more like a mystery drama than anything else. But they do a good job having the characters have some chemistry, even with Imhotep, though he's a bit of a stranger one. And he does a good job making him sympathetic enough. Also, another difference from the 90s one. The 90s one had him essentially be then fooling around with the pharaoh's wife, I believe. This one, it was essentially the pharaoh's daughter, but that he was in love with. But that wasn't the problem. She essentially passed away, but then he broke some taboos by finding a forbidden scroll and using that to try to resurrect her, which was seen as blasphemous. So that was what was actually his crime, rather than him having the affair. Well, on the other one, it was the affair was the problem, and then she got killed, and he was trying to resurrect her, but it got interrupted. So, yeah, there was apparently a lot of scenes were filmed of Anck-su-namun's like soul, like passing from person to person as like it kind of shows like her at a lot of different ages, which was cut, and that's unfortunate because I think that would have been some interesting footage to see a little bit more, and it would have gone into more of details on why she's being reincarnated, but unfortunately that hit the cutting room floor, and a lot of the cast is actually upset about that. Very well acted. It's a very basic plot line, but a lot of movies back then were. So I'm not holding that against this one. I like how you see a lot more from Boris Karloff than you did in Frankenstein. He was great as the monster. I think his role as Imhotep is definitely more breakout. MacGuffin-wise, I'm going to give The Mummy, I've been debating here, I'll give it a 7. Definitely worth seeing. It's a little dated, but it's well put together. I will say some of the there were a few moments that made me chuckle about talking about the British Museum more interested in science than looting. Just nowadays, like, okay, yeah, not so much. But yeah, it's definitely worth seeing, just especially as a time capsule. But it's very well acted, and they do a good job with a lot of having a lot of Egyptian mythology manifesting in some subtle ways. So overall, I do highly rate. Then I do really enjoy this version. Brendan Fraser one's still one of my favorites because goddamn, that movie is just a lot of fun. But this one definitely is great in its own regard. Alright, I'll probably see you guys tomorrow. See you later, Void.